Welcome back to week 2 of the Guided Nutrition Challenge. Before we dive into reviewing last week's dietary changes and before we start talking about what we're moving into this week, let's go ahead and review our intentions for this program. I want to clarify that this program is ideally designed to help you generate new lifestyle habits. The reason I believe that these habits will stick with you is because these strategies are not only new ways of relating with the diet, but many of these new orientations to your daily routine require little adjustments that grant big rewards over time. I want to start this week's program by pointing out the impact that the standard American diet and lifestyle have had on human bodies over a long period of time. This famous photograph called Lunch Atop a Skyscraper captured some bold construction workers casually munching down on lunch while sitting on top of a beam that was suspended thousands of feet in the air. This picture was taken in Chicago in 1932. What stands out to you the most? Other than the fact that these guys have decided to eat their lunch in quite a precarious place, what stood out to me the most was how relatively lean these men look. Despite the fact that several of these men are smoking, it is likely that this group still had relatively healthy metrics when it came to their metabolic health. This could include normal cholesterol, normal blood pressure, normal blood glucose levels, a healthy percentage of lean muscle tissue, as well as a healthy average body mass index. But this was 1932, and that was before processed and fast food made their way into our day-to-day reality. Well, it just so happens that this picture was recently remade by modern construction workers on a slightly colder day in Philadelphia. Let's look at the difference between the physical appearance of the average construction worker in 1932 versus now. Do you see the difference? Other than the fact that these men are all wearing hoodies and long-sleeve shirts, they are also probably, on average, 40 to 70 pounds heavier than the original crew. If you can't see what I'm talking about, take a look at the fifth guy from the right. He's the guy without a shirt. Then compare him to his modern-day stand-in, the fifth guy from the right, who is maybe 60 pounds heavier. This is a noticeable difference, and it's relatively consistent throughout the whole group. So much has changed in 90 years since the original photo was taken, but one of the most immediately obvious things that characterizes this moment in time is how much heavier we have become as a society due to modern conveniences and easy access to processed foods. This report from the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics shows that the average height of both men and women increased about an inch from 1960 to 2002. So collectively, people in the US have gotten slightly taller over time. Meanwhile, the average weight for men between ages 20 to 74 rose 25 pounds over the course of 42 years, while the average weight for women in the same category increased about 24 pounds in the same time period. While we have gotten only slightly taller since the 1960s, we have gotten much heavier. If aliens invaded the planet and found both of these pictures, they could easily tell that the diet of the first group of men was set up in a way that promoted general health and functionality, whereas the diet of the second group is somehow broken in a way that creates a less fit population on average. So today, I want to talk about some of the diet and lifestyle factors that have contributed to this new normal. Let's start by breaking down the standard American diet. This is the style of diet that has become unfortunately widespread all over the world with the advent of greater technology, shipping, and food storage techniques. I wanted to show you this illustration to really emphasize the big changes that we are making to the diet. When I say this program is about revolutionizing your relationship with food, I'm not exaggerating. This diagram represents the average diet for Americans. The acronym for the standard American diet is literally SAD, which is SAD, and this is actually a nod toward the overall quality of the diet. When I look at this chart and see the breakdown for what most Americans are consuming on a daily basis, what I feel most is concern. This chart breaks down the main sources of calories in the standard American diet. 55% of the calories come from processed foods like chips, cookies, microwaved burritos, and Kraft mac and cheese. 30% comes from animal products like steak, bacon, pork chops, fish, chicken, etc. While only 11% of calories are derived from things like vegetables, fruits, nuts, and beans, and then 4% are derived from whole grains. What I just told you is that most Americans are consuming diets where over half of their total food intake is from processed foods. Processed foods refer to any food that has changed from its natural state. Specifically, I'm talking about the type of processed food that has had added preservatives, artificial dyes, and coloring, flavors, salts, sugars, and fats. Processed foods are bad for the body because they are typically loaded with sugar, they are stripped of fiber, they are altered to be addictive, they're capable of creating mood swings, The labels are often complicated, and the words sound like something straight out of a chemistry book. They raise your sodium levels sky high. They can sabotage your sleep. They're low in nutrients. They prompt the body to overconsume calories, and they often contain unhealthy oils and trans fats. Take the diagram for the standard American diet and contrast it with our new model for eating, where vegetables, fruits, beans, legumes, seeds, nuts, and avocados and whole grains make up the vast majority of the diet, with very little room left for processed oils and sweets. What you are doing in reprogramming your diet is not a minor thing. Your food is the original resource, and it lays the foundation for what you physically become in this world. So the fact that you are committed to reorganizing your relationship with your diet is huge, and I want to take this opportunity to really acknowledge that. All right, now we're going to make the transition into reviewing the adjustments we made in week 1 of the program. In week 1, we focused on establishing a solid foundation for healthier eating practices. We subtracted 5 main things: the junk food from the pantry and refrigerator, the habit of counting calories as an attempt to maintain an ideal body weight, added sugars, and alcohol and caffeine. Also in week 1, we established an eating strategy for the next 4 weeks. That includes these 3 main practices: a focus on consuming nutrient-dense foods, eating light to heavy throughout the day, and 3 meals per day. And finally, we added a few things to the diet. We introduced warm lemon water, nutrient-dense smoothies, and a large green salad before lunch and dinner. These 3 habits are going to be the cornerstone of this diet program. I'm confident that if all you do for the remainder of this 4-week nutrition challenge is to consistently implement the changes from week 1, then you will still be happy with the outcome when all is said and done. With that being said, we still have more dietary tweaks and adjustments to make over the next few weeks. This week, we're going to fill in some of the holes that we left open in week 1. We are going to crack open the topic of how to stabilize your blood sugar levels so that you can avoid sudden dips in energy and cravings for high carbohydrate foods. In part 2, I'll introduce the concept of metabolic flexibility and talk about how we ideally want the body to operate throughout the day and what kind of fuel we should be giving it in order to achieve that goal. Part 3 is all about the science of carbohydrates. In order to really understand the importance of balancing your blood sugar and increasing your metabolic flexibility, we'll need to discuss some of the science behind how carbohydrates are metabolized and utilized by the body. We'll also discuss the glycemic index of different kinds of foods and how certain foods can trigger a blood sugar imbalance, which in turn throws off your ability to tell which nutrients are actually needed and in what quantity. In part 4, we'll talk about how the foods we consume in the standard American diet have the effect of dysregulating our blood sugar levels, which wreaks havoc on the body, creates inflammation in many organ systems, and makes you crave junk food. And this is really bad news if you're trying to maintain a proper hormone balance and an ideal body weight. And finally, in part 5, we're going to talk more specifically about what kinds of foods you should be primarily consuming for lunch and dinner throughout the week. I like to use the acronym GBOMBS to help me remember these superfoods that I want to include on a daily basis. GBOMBS stands for greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. These are nutrient-dense superfoods that most people can access in grocery stores and farmers markets all around the country. We'll dive into talking about each of these food categories, why they are important to consume, and I'll even provide you with some recipes that incorporate these foods in your course materials for the week. One major focus of this week's presentation and Zoom meetup will be to bring more conscious awareness to how the body feels after you eat, specifically how you feel after eating starchy or high carbohydrate meals. This awareness is very important for developing a sense of control over hunger and satiety. Satiety means that sense of satisfaction we get after we eat. It's when the body says, "Thank you for that nourishing meal, I am satisfied and I have had enough." And then we want the body to do its work metabolizing this nourishing food and pretty much leave us alone until the next appropriate mealtime several hours from now. But in order to set your body up for that kind of success, you have to feed it the right kinds of foods. When we look at this cake, we get an endorphin rush from the memory of eating sweet treats just like this one. But what the body often fails to remember is the subsequent crash that happens as a direct result of spiking your blood sugar. As we'll learn this week, regularly consuming high glycemic foods can throw your hormones off track. You eat a piece of cake on an empty stomach, and then your blood sugar goes really high and then dips really low. This hypoglycemic effect can make you feel like you need to eat right now, or else you're going to get really sick, weak, lethargic, moody, etc. It's not a genuine need for calories to fuel the body. It happens when your hormones are dysregulated. Our goal this week is to learn how to flatten the glucose curve so that you don't have to experience this type of toxic hunger ever again. And as you'll learn next week, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily cut out your favorite foods completely. There are dietary workarounds, but you've got to be smart about it. This is ultimately about designing a diet that enables you to get out of your own way so that your body can effectively do exactly what it was designed to do. To tell you when you're genuinely hungry, let you know when you've had enough, and leave you alone long enough so that you can focus your attention on something besides that next sugar fix.